Hello, thank you for joining me today. I am offering a perspective of decades within American Fisheries Society to address issues of diversity, inclusion, and I am co-authoring this with three of my colleagues that have been with me on this road for all of these decades: Brad Brown, Ambrose Gerald, and Mary Fabrizio. So the American Fisheries Society has 152 years with a legacy of engagement in policy and institutional development and science within the aquatic resources. Early naturalists and ecologists and all of the early founders of the society really disregarded traditional ecological knowledge and communities and certainly ignored the rights of any people of color to be part of these conversations. These institutions also monetized many selected resources and failed to value many native species and certainly actively pursued agrarian values. We have a lot of national and international challenges as part of this legacy and as part of looking at the future. We ask these questions of how can we be relevant to the local and larger issues of disproportionate power and economics, and can we expand these legacy societies to address challenges and increase our impact into the future? How can we work together to address these challenges? So I'm going to review a brief history of the diversity within AFS and bring to the table a picture of the 1936 AFS meeting in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And you notice the wealth of white faces out there and a number of ladies in hats, but I assure you that the ladies in hats were not active members of the American Fisheries Society, but were there representing with their husbands in this photo. So the diversity of the society moved from looking at geographic diversity, moving at least across from the original foundings in the New York and the greater Northeast region of North America, diversifying geographically, forming divisions, and then moving to subject areas to try to identify different focuses that could be appropriate, such as management, marine fisheries, fish health, aquaculture, and those different subject areas, and then into ignoring really the gender and racial and ethnic diversity for many years. Female leadership in AFS has really increased. Our strongest early leader was Emmeline Moore, shown here in a picture late in her career. She became the first female president of AFS in 1927. She was the first woman hired by New York Department of Conservation, and she proved to be an amazing, consistent leader in science and professional development, as well as had a huge interest in outreach to the public. This small figure here summarizes the number of articles in transaction that were counted, so in gray, and then it highlights one of two things, that women that were identified as a lead author in the proportion over here, and those which Dr. Moore was the lead author. And you can see early on in the publication history, this tract here, Emmeline Moore was the author of anything that was written by a woman in AFS, and tracked here through the last contributions. So quite a legacy and active participation. The second major female leader within AFS was J.D. Allen, She was really the only second woman to regularly participate in AFS annual meetings here. She was heading the National Science Foundation, one of their programs, for a number of years, and then she was recruited to the Environmental Protection Agency, where she worked for another number of years and was the U.S. representative to the OECD World Conference on Water Quality in Paris. But you would actively see JD in meetings within AFS as the only female around the table, but she was exceptionally effective. So institutional efforts within AFS to include or to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion really started in 1980 with the EEO committee formation, which was a joint effort by all of my authors today. Each one of these efforts, we tried to put together a summary of those different sessions, what the outcomes were, and so forth. And so I've got highlighted a few quotes here, but I think one of the early things that was put in publications is that we needed to gain insights from individuals who understand the needs of the profession and what it's like to be non-white or a woman. In the late 80s, a couple of special sessions and annual meetings were held focusing on Blacks in the fishery profession, particularly how to establish linkages within historically Black colleges and universities. And at that point, the J. Francis Allen Scholarship was begun, another to honor the legacy of J.D. Allen. In 1991, the Equal Opportunity Committee moved in to be the Equal Opportunity section. Within the way AFS operates, the sections actually have votes on the governing board, whereas committees don't. And so that was a major effort to put that on as a member of the governing board, and lots of activity over the years. But I just want to summarize that all of this ended with no strategic plan for action for the society as a whole. And many of these sessions and symposia were really held just with the choir. To try to break that tradition of gathering and talking about issues and not being able to really move the needle, in 2015, we got to the help of Mamie Parker, who was well represented in the natural resource community within the Fish and Wildlife Service as a fisheries chief, recently retired. We held a session with a panelist of only people of color, and we held it out in the foyer so that we would be more visible to anyone moving around at the meeting. And the many conclusions of this were put into a publication as well, is that our professional society efforts need to include partnerships with other organizations, including Hispanic serving tribal professional societies, etc. We also put forth that we asking leadership and members to place a process of diversity and engagement within sight of all activities, and that environmental justice should be included in planning all projects and collaborations. The next year, we held another session, again with Mamie as a facilitator, and that was highlighted with a publication in Fisheries that ended up identifying 9 action areas to enhance diversity inclusion within AFS. Again, these are all sort of internally looking outcomes. The institutional efforts within are also codified in the 2015 to 2019 strategic plan. Retention, leadership development, and promoting interdisciplinary efforts within the society and the profession. Included in that, certainly through the years, the Hutton Junior Fisheries Program was begun in 2001, and that was a recruitment effort to bring young, emerging high school students into opportunities to interact and do things in the fisheries profession during a summer internship, and hopefully garner their interest and engagement into AFS. So in 2018, a special committee on diversity, equity, and inclusion was begun with the mandate to revise a code of conduct and review meeting procedures and engagement. And this was a highly effective effort in terms of really putting down on paper, here's the rules, here's what we have to do, this is what you need, this is how your behavior needs to be at a meeting, and so forth. Well, that special committee, again, committees don't have a lot of power, was moved in to be a standing committee, and here it is to this date, the DEI Standing Committee, and they are charged with identifying systemic problems affecting diversity and inclusion and offer solutions for change. The bottom line is that AFS and its very traditional partners, which are fish and wildlife agencies and their partners, is moving really slowly. International Association elected its first woman president just recently. There's a National Association of Fish and Wildlife Programs that has 49 members, and only one is from an HBCU, and they have no tribal colleges or members in that association. So these are pipelines that are people interacting with agencies that have fish and wildlife programs. And then the USGS Co-op Research Units program has one on the paper at an HBCU, but it has never really been launched, and that's at Eastern Shore, Maryland as well. The association has produced a blue ribbon panel of how to diversify fish and wildlife resources, and has a relevancy roadmap, a recent publication. But it's ironic that just recently, last month, the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society entered into a memorandum agreement with the Fish and Wildlife Service to increase collaboration and coordination to utilize the National Conservation Training Center in West Virginia. So these separate professional institutions, we are still fairly divorced from. We are not interacting with them, and they have been effectively serving minorities and natural resources. There are many educational opportunities at historically Black colleges and universities and minority serving institutions, and we have very few really strong partnerships with them. This is just a map of the HBCUs, and there are key opportunities at other NOAA cooperative programs, and certainly AFS is definitely coordinated with NOAA. Two of those are their Living Marine Resources Cooperative Science Center, which is based out of the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, but has institutions that are partners that are listed here in different locations, mainly in the South. The Center for Coastal and Marine Ecosystems is also part of NOAA, and they have locations at a number of minority serving institutions. Hispanic serving institutions and Asian serving institutions are even fewer represented in these natural resource communities. And there's lots of opportunities for engagement if we open the door. Finally, we at AFS is trying to provide for opportunities for exchange and collaboration at college tribal colleges or indigenous networks. The upcoming Spokane meeting in Washington is in active collaboration with the Spokane tribe. They're part and parcel of the organizers for that event. But the summary is that if we're going to move forward, we have to change. We need to prioritize institutional changes in how we're operating and whom we're listening to reduce barriers. And only through connection and collaboration with colleagues and institutions that are serving Blacks and people of color can that happen. And then the final thing is that American Fisheries Society is active in policy outreach and policy engagement. And we need to review what those priorities are after you've had collaborations with Black and Indigenous and people of color. So I'm open to questions. Thank you very much.